Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Happy to Health podcast with myself, Ben Lewis, Danny Williams and Dan Hancock. Now, this week's episode is a bit different. We don't have a guest and we are just having a discussion between ourselves. And the topic we're discussing this week is the importance of a work-life balance. Now, this is something that we've probably all struggled with over the last 18 months with the pandemic and having to work from home. So sit back, relax, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome back to another episode of Happy to Health. I'm joined today by Dan and Danny, and myself, Ben, of course. And the question or the topic that I wanted us to discuss today is, how do we focus on a healthy work-life balance? All right, we're busy professionals. We've got a lot going on in our work life, and I imagine a lot of our listeners do as well. So I want us to open up that conversation. What can we do? What can we do better? And how do we manage it currently? So if I put it over to you guys, obviously you, from an outsider's perspective, looking at your social accounts, you guys are quite prolific on there, to the point where some people might think that's all he does, that's all his life is. So how do you guys manage your work-life balance in a professional sense?
Do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
You go first.
I mean, it's a big question. I think the thing is, you need to identify that it is a different life. It's a different part of your life. I think that's one of the key things, because a lot of people, they just have everything blend into one. They have a social life, they have a work life, they have a family life, and they have different things that all just blend into one life. Because that all blends in and they see it as the same thing, then they can't differentiate between them. They don't have boundaries. They don't know how to log off from the working life. So I think understanding what your key roles are in each area is massive. Understanding that there is a difference, and then knowing when to switch gears, knowing when to switch up in between them, because Danny will probably be able to relate, and you will, Ben, as well. If you just go through life constantly on one gear, it's fine. We talk a lot about identity. It's fine for us to be different people in different scenarios, and that's okay. Yeah. But it's about understanding what people we need to be in each scenario. So I always joke about it. Danny, you don't need to be hyped up on 3 coffees to do your morning emails. Right, but
some days maybe.
Some days, just like capital letters, like thank you. But yeah, but it's true. But people don't understand that, so they go through life unable to switch gears, and then one life blends into the next. And if one blends into the next, then none of them are worth celebrating. You're not going to be able to excel in any of them, because you'll just get bogged down by all of them. So I think understanding that and understanding your roles and responsibilities within each area of your life is massively important.
I just got an image of Jim Carrey in Bruce Almighty. You know, when he's doing the emails on his phone, he's got a coffee and he's like,
that's
that image in my head of but no, I think another huge thing is recognizing that your work-life balance, as in your own, is different or looks different to the people around you, and the people around you have different capacities to work at, and then also need to rest more or recover more or less than you. I think recognizing that you are individual and unique. You have your own individual work-life balance that needs to be, first of all, figured out. You can't just look at someone else and go, well, they sleep for 8 hours a day, so I need to sleep for 8 hours a day. Oh, they work for 10 hours a day, so I have to work for 10 hours a day. Oh, they're always flat out. I've always got to be flat out. I think recognizing that we've all got strengths and weaknesses that are different to the people around us will then allow us to map out, what is a healthy work-life balance for ourselves. Yeah. Because obviously we talk about a lot of comparing ourselves to other people, and it's no different with the work-life balance, especially if people around you seemingly have more energy than you or are more successful, quote unquote. You might be thinking, I need to be doing more, I need to be working harder. And I think there's almost a culture now, especially with social media. I know we spoke with Danny about it, Danny Book, on the podcast, and he said about this, I'll sleep when I'm dead mindset, but it's actually just a load of nonsense. It's a load of crap. You need to sleep and you need to recover and you need that balance. So I think recognizing that it's important to switch off and to log off and allow yourself to recover and recharge and reset. But then also when you're at it, when you are working, be accountable and recognize that you in order to fully recover, you need to work yourself to a point where you actually deserve and have earned that chance to recover too. You can't just right, it's 5 o'clock, that means I switch off now. But if you've not really worked that hard that day, then you might feel almost a bit guilty for switching off. You might feel like you can't switch off, or you feel like you've got more left in the tank and that kind of thing. So no, I think recognizing first and foremost what your work-life balance requires in the sense of, you know, how much sleep do you need, or how much time do you need to recover and log off, and how much do you need to be putting in when you are at work, I think is huge. And yeah, not comparing yourself to others as well is a massive thing.
Yeah, and just before I go back to you, Ben, very quickly on that, because we could spend all day talking about comparison again, and we do it all the time. But some of these people that you idolize online, or look at these, you know, CEOs or people of like big businesses or successful businesses, whatever it is, remember that, like, follow the accounts of people who are genuine and who are real as well. Because I know a lot of people who run really successful businesses and they're absolutely fucked. They're absolutely done in, because they are maybe potentially actually idolizing that work hard mentality, or justifying that to themselves, which I did in the past, which was, well, I had to burn myself into the ground to get here. No, you didn't. Like, does that show your work ethic? Yeah. Is that something to be proud of? It can be. But actually what we should be more proud of is knowing when to switch off, and knowing how to actually have a life as well. I don't know anyone that actually wants to run themselves into the ground whilst creating a business to then celebrate it with nobody. Like, what's the point?
I'd be fascinated to know from the people like you just described, the successful business owners that have got to a place where they can say, look, I used to work really, really hard and run myself into the ground. I'd be fascinated to hear from those types of individuals if they would feel like they would have got more done or achieved more if they'd have taken the time to rest, rather than just working flat out, and maybe their work wasn't as high quality or a high production. You know, if they've taken the time to recover and rest and recharge and reset, then when they did show up for work the next day, they was fully at it. And if they could compare the two journeys, which one would they take? I'd be fascinated to know. I'm assuming people would, if they could go back, maybe they wouldn't have worked themselves into the ground as much and actually taken the time to recharge and reset.
Well, I think we've definitely got a question there that we can ask you any future guests onto the podcast
100%.
and get their insight into it. But it's a great point you make, and I think you've both touched on something around switching off. So if you think about the last 18 months, right, which we talk about all the time, and people were forced to work from home, okay, so maybe people that were normally had a commute into an office, or they were working in a bar, or they were going to a restaurant, they'd had that taken away from them. Obviously, people working in bars and restaurants couldn't work from home, but for those that were working from home in a forced manner, how difficult do you think it's been for them to have that switch off? Because I think it was yourself that mentioned, Danny, getting to 5 o'clock and logging the laptop off. I think, certainly from my past experience, I was guilty of that in the past. I'd be like, well, it's only another hour. I don't need to drive home now. I can do a bit more work. So how much do you think that has impacted people being able to switch off? And I guess, do you guys have any tips that we could share with our listeners around what they could do to force themselves to switch off if they find themselves in that position?
I think the impact's been massive. You talk about having like different worlds that you tend to in your life. So your professional world, your personal world, your relationships, that kind of stuff. And I think what the pandemic did is bring all of those worlds under one roof, and we kind of had to combine everything in the same roof, under the same roof type thing. And I noticed from my dad, he has a job for CPS, so he kind of works in relation with the police type thing, and he has an office-based job. So you would go into the office in the morning, work in the office all day, then come home, and then when he comes home, like, work is finished, right? But what the pandemic did, like it did for so many people, is make him work from home for such a long period of time. And I noticed that his clocking off time just got extended longer and longer and longer. And I found himself finishing work at like 7 when it used to be like 5. And then it went from like 7 to 8. And I think it was hugely because he would probably associate going in the living room with work rather than going in the living room with just switching off and watching TV and stuff. So I guess a tip or a bit of advice might be, if you're still working from home and you find that difficult to find that balance and to be able to switch off, is maybe have parts of your house or home that you just do that. You just work from that part. So let's say you've got you're in your front room. You know, there's a table in the front room that you do work from, but when you're not at that table, you're not going to do any work. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Or maybe don't do work from your bedroom, for example, because then when you go into bed, you're going to associate that with work, and it's going to make it more difficult to sleep. Maybe just having that, compartmentalization of your house could make a huge impact if you're still working from home.
Yeah, it's huge. So there was a really interesting study. I won't be able to quote it exactly, but it was saying that individuals now who are working from home would rather work from home. So they're saying they would rather work from home, right? And they are saying they're more productive, and their employers are saying they're more productive, right? So it sounds good so far. But then they're also saying that they now find it difficult to distinguish between work and life, and exactly what you said within the home. So I think this then kind of goes back to a lot of the things that we talk about, that people aren't aware of their own health. A lot of the time they aren't aware of their own emotions, because they're thinking, right, I've got all these pros here, all these benefits, more productive, I get to make some of my own choices, I get a little bit more freedom, and the employer's thinking, right, this is great, this is amazing, I get more work done. So all in all, we're thinking this is really positive, but then not being able to have that work-life balance and that switch off at home, that's the thing that they said they can't get, but they're casting that aside, and they aren't seeing that with as much importance. But that's the thing that's going to have the long-term detrimental effect. That's going to be the thing that makes them end up resenting working from home, or makes them run into the ground, or makes them stressed without knowing it. Because even when in the past, if it wasn't a corporate world or you were in an office, you could still kind of leave that stress at the office. I know a lot of people would still bring it home, but you could still have those physical boundaries. There's no change to that physical boundaries there, which is the difficult thing. And I think I'm not dismissing it, because I think it's brilliant that we have this new hybrid way of working and this new age way of working. I think that's brilliant. But I think it's not necessary to make people work from home. It's to give people the freedom to work from whenever or wherever, whenever they want to, as long as they get that work done. I think that's what's important, not just working from home. But boundaries is key. What Danny said, environment. One of the key issues when my gym closed throughout lockdown to getting people to exercise, because they didn't want to exercise in the house, because their living room is where they watch TV, their spare room is where they play with their kids. So I used to have to say to them, I was like, okay, well, maybe don't exercise like at home. I don't ever want them to then associate their living room where they relax at night with doing fucking burpees. Like, I don't want that. And then personal trainers all over the UK wondered why they couldn't get the clients to exercise from home. So environment's massive. A good way to change your environment is to temporarily change it. So going out for a walk for 10 minutes, clearing your head. Then when you then go back in, there's been a switch without you knowing it. Just sort of unknowingly, a kind of a subconscious switch. And then little things like get out and be a little bit more sociable as well, if possible. Why not go and work in a coffee shop somewhere? Why not, if you can, I know this might sound really obscure to people, but go off on a train and maybe travel to somewhere else, or drive in a car to somewhere else. Change your environment, change location, even if it just means working in a coffee shop somewhere different for 3 hours, eating something different to eat, and not having those boundaries. Because one of the things that I've enjoyed massively over the last year is actually traveling alone a little bit, as well as with you, but traveling alone, exploring a different city. And then it's just, it just makes you feel good, and then your productivity goes through the roof. So I know not everyone can do that, but if you justify it and if you prioritize it, you will find a way to do it in some way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that justification is massive, because if I go back to when I was working my corporate job and I was working from home, I justified the extra hours I was doing because I thought, well, I'm not driving to the office anymore. So when I would leave the office at 5 o'clock, drive home, I might get home at 5:45. I then justified that in my head that, well, I would normally be driving anyway, so I'm going to work between that extra hour, 45 minutes or whatever. But then I started doing the same thing in the morning and getting up at the same time. But rather than at the point I left the house, I was logging onto my laptop and justifying it to myself, saying, well, I don't have to commute anywhere
I hope this was before you started working with me, and I'm not going to get the blame for that.
Absolutely. But it wasn't until I switched that
slave driver.
It wasn't until I flipped that perception of that and stopped justifying it to myself, because again, that switch off period previously happened when I got into the car. It's that literal physical act of leaving the office, shutting the door behind you, getting in the car to go home, being lost in your own thoughts as you're driving out, as you do, a bit of the way home, thinking about what happened. But then by the time I got home, I was ready to go home and be the best partner that I can be for my partner. I'm then ready to settle down and enjoy the evening. And I guess if you don't have that anymore, I'm going from, right, well, I don't need to drive anymore now. I'll do an extra hour of work, and I'm going straight downstairs after that. My mind is still buzzing with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
So it's changing that and stop justifying the wrong behaviours, I guess.
Yeah, because we'll justify, we'll try and always find an answer or an explanation for a behaviour. But what you mentioned there was actually is a massive point as well. driving can be really therapeutic.
Yeah.
I talk about it quite a lot. Like when you're driving, you almost go into a semi-meditative state, the exact same thing that you do when you're almost falling asleep. You do that.
Is that why you're a bad driver?
I'm in a semi-meditative state, like driving through a field of cows and stuff. It's true. You go into that state, and actually to lose that forced meditation or that forced reflection or that forced period of awareness throughout the day can be quite damaging, as well as lots of other things that can be quite damaging from working through home. You know, sitting on couches, your activity levels are going to your activity levels are going to plummet. Things like that.
Definitely. So another point which we've kind of touched on, I mentioned when we were talking about people working from home over the last 18 months. Can we focus a bit on people that might not necessarily work in an office job, so your bar workers, your restaurant workers, typically people that would work shifts. Now, I know I've been in that position. Danny, I know you were a barman in a previous life, and you worked in the gym floor and also in a bookies. So I knew how hard that was to get into a good routine when I was doing shift work. It's like some days I might be starting at 7 a.m, other days I might be doing an overnight shift, other days I might be doing a mid shift, and then there is the natural tendency, if there's extra hours, going, yeah, I'll do some extra hours for a couple extra quid in the pocket. How did you guys manage it in the past, getting that work-life balance? Or did you manage it at all? And then also, I guess at the same point, because exercising is such a big part of what we do and who we are, were you able to find times around fitting in that shift work into exercising regularly as well?
I'll kick things off by saying I had no work-life balance when I worked in bars and restaurants. I found it very difficult. So I started working in bars when I was about 15, 16. So I was still it wasn't even a work-life balance, it was a school-life balance. Like I was school, then college, trying to work. At the same time, it was difficult to find balance. To be honest, I was probably a bit naive and probably just assumed that I had unlimited energy and I was just expending it constantly. Schoolwork, college work, going to the bar, working late shifts, finishing late, getting in late, then getting up early. And I think I probably got away with it being naive and being very, very young. And then I'm pretty sure if I'd have stayed on that trajectory, I would have definitely burned out. But luckily I didn't reach that point because I wasn't doing it so intensely for so long. But if I could look back now, I can say honestly, like I had no work-life balance, and it probably did affect my productivity. Like I probably thought, cocky little 16-year-old me, like people don't need to sleep. Like you don't need to, like all you guys are getting up late and, going to bed early. Like you just do what I do and sleep for 3-4 hours and you'd be fine. But looking back now, I reckon the times when I was awake, supposed to be productive and supposed to be being on job, I probably was nowhere near as effective as I could have been. And kind of cast my mind forward to how I am now in the last couple of years with my productivity and work-life balance. It's much more balanced now, and I'm much more aware of how important it is as well. I can't imagine how much it would negatively impact me if the scales tipped in the wrong way. I literally would. I'd be useless. Like even just like a little bit less sleep than I'm used to, and I can't even spep coherently. Like sleep is so important. I'm on like triple shot coffee. Like
quadruple shot.
Yeah. So yeah, it massively impacts me, and I think you can have a work-life balance in a sense of how much you work in contrast to how much you rest and recover, but also like I talked earlier about kind of compartmentalizing like your home and where you work and areas that you work, and you talk about that physical association with different things. And for me, having an area in my apartment where I call it an office, but it's just a part of my second room where I only do work from there and my laptop doesn't really move from there. I think having that was huge, because otherwise, I mean, we all have smartphones these days and we can pretty much work from our phones as well. Yeah. But I try to do as little work as possible on my phone, and then as much work as possible on my laptop, which means if I'm working, it's normally at my desk. Yeah. And then I'm never like on my phone trying to reply to emails and trying to reply to stuff and trying to upload stuff and trying to edit stuff. Even though our phones have that capacity these days, I really try to limit that. And that's been a huge, it's been hugely beneficial to my work-life balance trying to do that.
Yeah, I think for me as well, like going back to that, it was a previous life, like it was, and I didn't have a work-life balance because I didn't know what work was. I didn't know what like life was at the same time as well. So how could I have a work-life balance if I have no idea what either of those things are, what they mean to me? And yeah, it was. So yeah, I used to work in a bookmaker's. I used to absolutely love it.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, I used to work in a bookies. And
Got some stories that we can share for another time.
not
being recorded.
Not on this. Not on this podcast. Well, Dan Bears All can be a special exclusive. And no, I used to love it, and I've joked about it in the past, but I actually mean it. I loved it because it taught me stuff that no other job would have. A punter would come in and swear at you, and you'd swear right back. A customer would throw a bookie pen at you, and you throw it right back.
Wow!
Like there's no other one. Well, it's
was
one
that
of the
just,
only
sorry? Was
jobs.
that just standard? Is that all bookies, or was that you in a bookie? Is that how all I've never. Is that how bookies work? I'm glad I don't gamble. Pens thrown at me.
But it was amazing because you saw people of every walk of life as well. You would have people who may be a little bit down and outs who would be in trying to, win some money. And then you'd have professional gamblers, these hot shots in. And then you'd have everyone in between, young lads going and putting a coupon on for the weekends. You'd have every walk of life. So it allowed you to communicate with anyone from any background. And that's what I thought was really cool as well. But yeah, when it was then, what I thought health was doing everything that I could to become big and muscly and fit and healthy. And at that moment in time, I didn't have a gym membership. So I would go do a 12-hour shift, and there would be, behind the counter, there would be a tiny little cupboard, like honestly, like 1 meter by 2, something like that. It's where they stacked all the pens, and I would go in and I'd just do push-ups in this cupboard. I'd do push-ups in the cupboard. I took resistance bands. There was a little mirror that size as well, tiny little mirror size in my head that still looked out into the shop floor. So I knew that anyone could poke their head in at any point and see some guy out of breath jumping about this tiny little
Probably
cupboard.
thought you was up to something else other than trying to get push-ups in.
And so that was me prioritizing something. Little did I know at the time that wasn't actually prioritizing my health. That was prioritizing probably obsessive behavior. Unbeknownst to it. So yeah, there wasn't a work-life balance for me then, and I think sometimes it does take people just to go through experiences and go to work a couple of times hungover to then realize, right, this isn't for me. I don't want to be like that anymore. To make some mistakes at work in order for them to realize that isn't the way that they want to act. But when it comes to the balance, I think because of the level that we've got to now, it's an absolute necessity. Yeah. It's not something that can be neglected. We have to focus on ourselves first in order for anyone to get any value from us.
Yeah.
So my main takeaway from this would be, when it comes to work-life balance, neither of those are going to work. Just put it on yourself first. Prioritize number one. Focus on your own health, your own exercise, your own nutrition, and then everyone else is going to benefit you. People have got it in their heads that focusing on yourself is selfish. It's absolutely not. If you're being focused fully on yourself first, every single person around you is going to benefit from that. And if you teach them to do it, then every single person around them is going to benefit. Then we can have a knock-on effect of everyone improving their own health.
Yeah, totally agree. Fully agree with everything you said there. But I guess that's down to the individual, the person doing it by themselves, focusing on themselves. What do you think employers could do differently? Because at the same time, as much as we or our listeners might want to focus on themselves and try and get that work-life balance, I think employers need to take some responsibility and a bit of accountability to enable this to happen for some people. So I know, Dan, you've done a lot of research into sort of what would be seen as progressive companies around the world and the impact that they're having on their employees. So what more do you think could be done, and when do you think they should start doing it?
Yeah, right. How long have we got left? Right, okay. Opening a can of worms. So I'll try and condense this as much as I can. Yeah. So 3 out of 4 employees feel as if their employers don't value their health or don't value them. 3/4. That's 75%.
That's shocking, isn't it?
Right, but then think about this. Up in Scotland, we've not been able to get a train for months because the trains aren't running at the weekends because ScotRail are on strike.
Yeah.
Companies are still going on strike. Like, it's absolutely crazy to think that in this day and age, people still aren't understanding that your employees have to be fit and healthy in order for the company to be fit and healthy. And we did a podcast again with Danny Buck, and one of the questions that I asked him was, right, you've got a progressive business idea, but that doesn't mean you've got a progressive company. It turns out he does have an extremely progressive company. But I said, what do you do in order to value your employer's health? And I used to have, I've shared this with you guys before, I used to have an employee wellness company, and I'd go around the workplace trying to get them to prioritise staff wellness, exercise during an hour of the day. I took exercise to them, and the first question they said was, oh, this is great, but when are we going to do it? They can't be away from their desks for an hour. And it's that attitude that's running people into the ground. And it is stress that is one of the biggest killers within the UK. And all of the other biggest killers around the world, or causes of death around the world, will in some way link back to stress. So there's a ton that we can be doing in a lot of countries in Scandinavia. Sweden in particular, they have gyms on site. People will have a key fob in.
People will fob.
People will fob. People go to the gym to fob. People will accrue the hours that they've been in the gym. The company then gives them back as annual leave. And the issue that I have is everyone looks at that and goes, oh my God, that's so progressive. It shouldn't be progressive. We should be doing things actively now that put staff wellness first. Another one, did you guys know, in Romania,
this is a new one.
In Romania, they had bus stops and you had to do 20 squats before you were allowed on the bus.
Wow. I've not heard of that.
I've not. I mean, you've thrown some pretty mad studies at me.
Yeah, it's in a city in Romania. Yeah,
and if you can't do 20 squats or you're physically impaired,
you get made to walk. So either way, you're exercising.
The bus driver has like, no, you're not getting on.
We should get some.
I didn't read that far. I didn't read that far. I don't know what happened.
They'd be brilliant at our head-to-head challenge, wouldn't they?
So yeah, I think it's absolutely massive. And like Danny, I suppose you'll be able to pitch in here from someone who has a very, very, very busy work life. You have found a balance, I feel, to prioritise certain things. You know, you're very fit, very active, very healthy. You look after your own health. But from an employer standpoint, how is important, if that was taken out of your hands, how important is it for them to be putting that first so the employees don't even have to think of it themselves?
Well, I think the irony of it is if employers cared more about this and put more effort and attention and investment into this, it would actually benefit them as a company more long term. It's just we live in an age where everything has to be instant. We need a result right now. We need the success to be right now. If we're going to invest this money, we want it in a return with interest right now. And that's quite often why, companies turn their noses up when people like yourself come in with brilliant ideas to suggest how to get, productivity and efficiency of their employees to increase by having an hour off to exercise, and companies like, well, no, because when are we going to see our money back? And actually, if you take a much more of a long-term approach and a long-term view at things, you're going to get a return plus interest, without a doubt. It's undeniable. But unfortunately, we live in this age where everything needs to be instant, and that's what's making it quite a difficult thing to tackle. But from my perspective, I can say, I'm self-employed, but if I was to work for a company, which I have in the past, I've had other jobs where I've worked for businesses, and I know firsthand that if they took the time and investment in us as employees and got us doing things that was good for our mental health, i.e. exercising, even if it's for an hour a week, that's going to help with our productivity, with our interpersonal skills, team building. If I'm on a team, like when I was a bartender, working with there was a huge divide when I worked in a cocktail bar, one of the bars particularly, between the bar staff and the waiting staff.
Could you do all the tricks, all the juggling?
Some. I worked at a cocktail bar called The Alchemist. So there's a chain of them all over the UK. So it wasn't like compulsory that we had to do that kind of stuff, but some bartenders encouraged it. Some kept it quite slick and professional, but didn't do the tricks and stuff. Yeah. I dabbled in it sometimes. It depends if there was like a certain person watching at the bar or something. There's like cocky little 18-year-old me flipping bottles and stuff.
Hindu walks in.
I was that rolled the sleeves up really tight. That was me, to be quite honest. But yeah, if I'm not to discredit The Alchemist or anything like that, I think they're a great company, but if businesses took more of a long-term approach and focused on the employees' mental health, got them to do exercise once a week, for example, as a team, I know full well that when that Saturday night shift hits and it's absolutely crazy, like Manic City, and you've got drinks orders flying about and customers being rude and all the kind of things that you associate with a busy Saturday night in a restaurant or cocktail bar, I'm going to be a better member of staff in the situations where it really counts, because I feel like I'm a better member of a team. I'm in a better headspace. I'm more resilient, and all these great things that come from doing exercise. But like I said, unfortunately, some big companies have more of an old-fashioned approach and more of a short-term approach. And I think that's one thing we definitely need to try and tackle and try and change.
Brilliant. So I guess then let's think about that, because we'll be finishing soon. Ben, I don't know if this is something that we're going to then cover, but why don't we think of them 3 things that an employer can do right now? What 3 things can an employer do right now in order to start prioritising their staff's wellness? And maybe I actually think, because you said it's not instantaneous, but what 3 things can they do to actually get more of an instant response? So a big thing would be a social exercise together, wouldn't it? Because that they would be able to see team morale go up straight away, and they would be able to see communications between staff go up straight away, whether it is the cleaner, whether it is then with someone in the office, whether it's then with the CEO. That can break down some of those professional boundaries, and having those conversations, I know, would be an instantaneous thing.
I think that's a great point. I think that'd be a great thing to introduce. You mentioned a stat earlier about 3 in 4.
3 out of 4.
3 out of 4, 3/4 of the people think that their employers don't care about their health.
Yeah.
Or was it their mental health? Sorry.
Just their overall health.
Their overall health.
Overall health. Yeah.
Which is a shocking stat considering we spend most of our times at work. Most of our time is spent at work or thinking about work. And if 3/4 of us don't even think that our work cares about our health, then what does that say? But I think a huge thing would be, obviously it's probably harder in much bigger businesses, but if there was more of a connection with the top of the company right down to the bottom of the company, and we talk about culture, and with businesses that are generally successful, they quite often have a healthy culture at the company. Yeah. And I think the 25% of employers who feel like their employees are cared about from a health perspective probably work for a company where they've got a healthy culture. Yeah. So I think encouraging more of a healthy culture in businesses, even that's from as simple as a CEO just asking the cleaning staff if she's having a good day, or how is she when she walks in, or leaving the door open for her, or something. Just being more respectful, being more caring for the employees, I think will be a huge difference.
Yeah. I think the one I would suggest would be education.
Yeah.
We talk about that massively, like people need to be educated on the benefits of things. Let's not see exercise as a chore, but something that we can learn from, which is what we talk about all the time. So I think educating both employers and employees on the benefits to work-life balances, but also the benefit in a business sense as well, if there's increased revenues, increased profits, and more kind of employee output and productivity, fewer sick days, all this kind of stuff. We can actually educate and say, look, we are encouraging you to do exercise because these are all the benefits for you and for us. I think that would go a long way to try and improve in that space, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Magic. Well, I think we've covered quite a lot in that episode. It's been a really good chat, guys, and I think for any of our listeners listening to this, if there's anyone out there that has some really good examples that they can share with us about how they manage their work-life balance, let us know. If you're an employer out there or you work in a company that is really good at this, we'd love to hear it as well and champion you guys that are out there trying to make a positive difference. Let us know, get in touch, and we'll share it.
Okay, that was great. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed chatting about it. So please remember, as we always say at the end of these, please share with a friend, a family member, and remember to like, comment, subscribe, and leave reviews. Your support is greatly appreciated by us at the team here. And